In July, we held the first part of this hearing examining oversight of the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic within the purview of this committee. Today we'll hear about the impact of the government's COVID-19 relief funding and response efforts have had on transportation sector, its workers, on the ability of states and localities to support their communities with COVID-19 testing and vaccination, and on our nation's economy. Also hear from our witnesses about how these efforts can be improved to be even more effective in the future. The pandemic has had devastating public health consequences for our nation and the world. More than 42 million Americans have been infected, 675,000 have died, and the federal government was called upon to maintain a national scale response to this crisis for an unprecedented period of time. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has led the way in protecting the health and well-being of our communities. They've helped states and local governments establish community vaccination centers, provided relief for COVID testing, delivered tens of millions of N95 masks, surgical gowns, other personal protective equipment. States and local governments now receiving reimbursement from FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, for 100% of the costs for the safe opening and operation of schools, hospitals, shelters, transit systems, in addition to prevent the further spread of the virus and protect the health of transportation workers and passengers. President Biden has ordered masks to be worn on transportation modes, including buses, airplanes, ferries, and other forms of transportation. It not only hit the health of our citizens, it obviously directly impacted our economy. Commercial airline demand fell to virtually nothing, affecting revenues for airlines, airports, associated businesses. Today, passenger levels are 25% lower still than before the pandemic and not looking too good in the near term. Transit ridership on buses, subways, and commuter van pools across the country has been decimated. Here in D.C., ridership on Metro Rail decreased 90%. These declines led to devastating economic consequences for local, regional, and state governments, transit agencies, airlines, airports, among many others. Companies operating shuttle buses, private bus charters were not spared. Some were forced to suspend service due to lack of passengers, some went out of business altogether. It'll take our transportation networks a very long time to recover financially, and they may be forever altered by changing workplace practices. Congress took unprecedented actions to help cushion the economic blow to these transportation sectors. The programs Congress created, the funding it authorized, helped transit and bus operators, airlines, airports, other companies provide paychecks to their employees, essential transportation services to communities across the country. Federal relief funds administered by the Federal Transit Administration allow transit agencies to keep critical service running, avoid layoffs, provide workers and bus riders with COVID-19 protections. In aviation, the payroll support program provided financial assistance to airlines, actually, to their employees, administered by the airlines, manufacturers, and other related businesses for wages, salaries, and benefits. Airports, which also suffered revenue losses, received additional grant assistance from the Federal Aviation Administration for costs such as salaries and debt service. Congress also created the Coronavirus Economic Relief Transportation Services, our CERTS program, so that motor coach, school, and bus passenger vessel companies affected by the pandemic can maintain their payroll and hire back employees who were laid off. These and other pandemic relief programs have helped thousands upon thousands of workers and their families. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so far this year, job growth has averaged nearly 600,000 new jobs each month, although not last month. The economy has also been growing due in part to a boost from pandemic relief spending, with gross domestic product expected to show a substantial increase this year. Governors, mayors, local officials, labor, business, all have applauded the support Congress provided through legislation that stopped the hemorrhaging of the economy and helped to fight the COVID epidemic. Today we'll hear from witnesses about how the federal government's pandemic assistance has helped transportation workers, emergency managers, nation's economy. Also hope to hear their views on how the federal government can do a better job as it continues to help our country recover from the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and how it can be better prepared to respond to future disasters. Thank to all our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to your testimony. With that, I yield to Ranking Member Mr. Crawford.
I thank